So go to the next. So this is roughly what the schedule is going to be. We'll take the week off of Father's Day just because I'm sure people have things going on. But the first 3 sessions are all about this technique he calls Columbo. You'll understand what he means by the title as we go through today. And then the next 5 sessions are different sub-techniques to try to deal with people that are challenging you and how you address the challengers. So we'll just kind of go through each one. And so the intent is we'll start with kind of a review of what we did the last session, and then we'll watch the video, and then we'll talk through the notes in the book. Each section has a self-assessment. So when you start the next session, you go through the self-assessment again. There is some homework, which we'll see. Most of us aren't engaged in the workplace enough that we can practice these things, but it should be good. Well, you're going to need to vent that, turn that off anyway.
Yeah. Before I play the debate.
Yeah, so go to the next slide. So before we get started, that's one of the questions that Greg's going to ask at the beginning is, when you think about discussing Christianity with a non-believer, which of these categories do you fall under?
Which is encounter?
You relish the encounter?
Yes.
Well, 15 years ago, I was here.
I tried to avoid it. Hang on, let's wait for Sergeant Walter about this question.
Okay.
I look forward to it.
We're waiting for you. Come on in.
Thank you. Sorry, really.
That's all right.
Hi.
So before we get started, we were just talking, Greg's going to ask this question at the beginning of the session is, when you think about discussing Christianity with non-believers, which of these categories are you in? Annie said I relish the encounter. I said 15 years ago, I tried to avoid it. 10 years ago, it scares me, but I might try it. Probably 5 years ago, I was willing, but a little uncertain. And then now I'm actually excited about it because, well, we have what we need. We just need to trust God with the encounter.
I'm still I'm willing but nervous. Uncertain.
I feel that way. It's sort of how do I deal with this? How do I approach this? Yeah, that's
Yeah, this is when you
like your father.
you're talking to your dad about Christianity.
Are you like?
Do you relish the encounter, or are you really trying to avoid it? Or is somebody you're working with, if they ask you about your Christianity, does it make you uncomfortable, or are you excited to have that conversation? I have to admit, I've been down here most of my life. I think I'm on the top now because I feel like I have something to say that is not threatening. The problem I always had is most of the things that would come out of my mouth were like hitting somebody in the face, and it's not very constructive. So
It's more of questions like, how do I approach this?
but effectively, that's the whole point of Kokel's class, this book, Tactics, is how do we engage people in a way that's non-threatening, that actually allows them to explain their position in a way that makes it easy for us to answer their doubts.
It's one of a productive conversation instead of you turn them off.
Go along with the flow. Like, for example, when you talk about things, about events, and then there's a way to introduce God.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Like slowly.
It becomes natural.
It becomes
in the
natural.
conversation.
Yeah, I'm still not that skilled at that, but I can use the question approach, which is what we're going to be learning. I think what Annie's talking about is a little more advanced than where I'm at, because it's experience of using it, right?
Her situation sometimes it's a little easier because you're with somebody, like for a long period of time, one person. But like my situation is kind of different. They know I always get God in the conversation, but to be like telling like an individual like a certain thing, it's hard because they would run away or they're going to do something else, and you don't have this like prolonged period of time where you can like talk to them about it, like and there's several of them. So It's a joke at work when they're like, "Yo, come, Jesus is gonna be there," because I don't want to come. It's like in a party or whatever. Then they will joke to me like, "Oh, Jesus is gonna be there too, so you come."
But I think that's the one thing that I like about Kokel's approach is he gives us kind of nuggets and useful tips on how to engage the person you might only have 15 minutes with, and then they're gone. And he's like, that's okay. I don't have to get all the way to the gospel. All I have to do is put that stone in the shoe, and then the next person, like Annie, can come in and reap the harvest, right? So it's for most of us, most of our encounters are short. But, well, you got to have both, right? You have to be prepared to do what Annie's talking about doing. You have to be prepared to do the short one. Just let God lead wherever that moment is, and that's kind of the focus of
There's
this.
some difficult questions out there. Like I got asked, and I was not quite sure how to.
I think what I have in mind when I introduce God to some people is like, I'm just planting seed. It's not, I don't have the power to convert them.
Amen.
I just have to tell them about God, what He did to my life, and what's the reality. But I don't know if you will believe or not believe. I'm just going.
No, and that's the attitude. I think if we all took that attitude, then we wouldn't have so much fear in the encounter. And I think,
You don't need to make them say yes.
yeah, so I think one of the things that I think will come out of this class, I know it did for me, is the idea that you don't worry about the outcome. You just present things as the Holy Spirit leads you. And we're developing tactics in the class we had before and this one, so we have something to respond to the doubt, put that stone in the shoe, and wait for the next time, right?
Before, my uncertainty more surrounds like how the approach, because my approach can turn off somebody to Christ instead of make them curious. So that always kind of how do I approach this?
Yeah, well, Judy and I are bulldozers, so we always have to be careful that we don't bloody the nose before we have an opportunity to have the conversation. And then, yeah, I think it's learning how to gauge your audience and then have a response that intrigues them enough to dig deeper, either with you or without you, right?
Finding the connection or common interest is my colleague. He likes history, so we talk about history,
including Christianity.
Yeah.
Including the history of Christianity.
Jews and Romans.
Yeah, if we can tie things together and then show how Christianity has been the thing that has made sense through history, that it actually is a good tool. It's very convincing.
I'm not in the workforce, and most of the people I know are at church.
Yeah. In the
But
grocery store, you see them for
Yeah.
very short period.
But the people I have the most difficulty talking to are my family, not my daughters, but my
Yeah, the
family in
extended.
Louisiana who are Catholics. Most of them don't even go to church anymore. That's like taboo. You don't even mention God. And so I'm like, I don't know how to.
This is going to work for you, because this is all questions where you honestly ask them a question about their own perspective and let them explain it to you. And it can reveal a lot. So,
Because if you say God, they're like,
Oh, no. Shut you already.
yeah, so this first session is called Columbo. Let's listen through the video, and then I think a lot of it will kind of come clear. Go ahead and play the video. And this is Greg Kokel, for those of you that don't know. Stand to Reason is his ministry. He's been a radio and TV personality for about 3 decades in the Christian world, so he's been around.
Hi, I'm Greg Kokel with Stand to Reason. And first of all, welcome to the class. I am thrilled that you're taking this class for a very important reason. I think you may very well look back on this particular time that you've spent with me and this tactics class as a turning point in your life. That is, as a time when everything changed for you in the way you engage other people about the gospel of Christ. This is what happened to me. 10 or 15 years ago when I began to use these tactics more effectively. And I have taught this to thousands of people, literally. And everywhere I go, people come back to me and they tell me, this changed my life. This training, this teaching, this approach to engaging people with the claims of Christ has absolutely changed my life. So I have a great expectation that this is going to be the same for you. And so I encourage you, don't miss a single session if you're going to do this as a group. It's that important. Now, the reason that you're going to be a different person, things are going to change for you because of this course, is because I'm going to provide for you something that has been missing in your training so far. I get a chance to speak at a lot of conferences. There are conferences where a lot of people go to them and a lot of smart guys are doing the teaching, okay? And they bring lots and lots of good information, and that's fabulous. We need it. And in fact, there's hardly a challenge that has been made on Christianity that hasn't been addressed by some really thoughtful person and dealt with, so we don't have to be afraid of anything. But there's a problem with these conferences, and the problem is, well, it reminds me of the Far Side cartoon where the guy's at a class, and it's a math class, and all the equations are on the board, and the student raises his hand and it says, "Professor, could I please be excused? My brain is full." You ever had that situation where you're just overwhelmed with all of the information? It's great, the information that's being given, but there's something missing. And the thing that's missing is a bridge from the content to the conversation, a bridge from the scholarship to the relationship. How do you take all of that stuff that you've been learning and get it in play in a productive way in a conversation? And that is the missing piece that I want to give you in our time together. So here's what I have in mind for our first session together. First, I want to define tactics. I want to tell you what they are, how they're used, and I want to warn you about a danger in using a tactical approach, okay? The second thing that I want to do is I want to suggest a significant change in the way you approach what we usually call evangelism, okay? A different way of looking at it. The third thing I want to do is I want to introduce you to the first and the most powerful apologetics tactic, the one that really is the very core of our game plan. And what I'd like to accomplish in the process is not to just give you more information. I want to make a contribution in your life to help produce a certain type of person. Now, I call that an ambassador for Christ. An ambassador for Christ is somebody who has three essential skills. First of all, they know some things. Every ambassador has to have a basic knowledge of the thing that the sovereign wants to communicate through that ambassador, okay? So they need knowledge, an accurately informed mind, okay? But it's not just enough to have the knowledge. They have to have a means of communicating that knowledge that is effective. So I call that wisdom, an artful method. But if you have the knowledge and you have the method, but it turns out you're a drunk or a womanizer or just plain rude, you can see now how a person's character is going to undermine the message. So the third issue is character. You have to have an attractive manner. This course focuses in principally on the second element of being a good ambassador, the tactical skill of engaging people in conversation. So let me pause for a moment and talk about the difference between tactics and strategy. You hear these terms being used in military circumstances and conversations and the like. There is a difference between the two of them, and especially as we engage other people with the claims of Christ, we want to think of these two different things. A strategy kind of involves the big picture. And the way I look at that with regards to our circumstance as Christians is the big picture involves all of the information that we have to make our case. Whether we are defending against a challenge to Christianity, we call that sometimes defensive apologetics or negative apologetics, if you will, or whether we're making a positive case for Christianity, and some call that positive apologetics. In either case, we have the goods. We have the best content, the best information. We have the best worldview, the one that makes best sense of reality. And so we have the goods. That's the big picture. But how do we get the goods into play in a conversation with people? And this is what I was talking about a few moments ago when I talked about the bridge. This is where tactics come in, because tactics, simply put, are about how we take those resources that we have at our disposal and we put them into play to maneuver in conversations. Now, I got to offer a warning here because there is a downside here. These tactics are very, very powerful. That means that you can use these tactics if you have ill will to make people look foolish and stupid and that kind of thing. And this isn't the purpose. The tactics are not tricks. They are not slick ruses. They are not clever ploys to destroy non-Christians or force them to submit to your own point of view. They are not attempts to belittle or humiliate or to gain notches in our spiritual belts. This is not what we're about. This is not our spirit here. Okay? Instead, what I am teaching you are tactical maneuvers and conversations that will actually help you to manage the conversation, not to manipulate people. It'll help control the circumstances that you're in, not coerce people. We're not forcing our views. We're offering arguments. We're seeking to persuade people. Okay? We want to finesse them, not fight with them. All right? We want to use our tactics to maneuver and navigate through the minefields that we invariably are going to encounter when we're talking with other people about our convictions. Basically, the point of the tactical approach is to put you in the driver's seat. Okay, we'll revisit that notion a number of times, but I want to teach you a technique that will allow you to stay in the driver's seat yourself. So now we know what tactics are and what they're not. And I want to talk next about an insight that has completely changed my approach to conversation with other people. A number of years ago, after having, long seasons of frustrating engagements with others, it became clear to me that I was using the wrong approach. And the insight that helped me out here was simply this: before there can be any harvest, there's always got to be a season of, let's just call it gardening, okay? And this is so important, I want to repeat it. Before there can be any harvest, there always has to be a season of gardening. And you think about it, virtually no one anymore goes from 0 to 60 overnight. They don't get introduced to the gospel and then become a Christian right away. That almost never happens, especially in our communities right now. Those kinds of important decisions take lots of time. And I want you to think about what Jesus said in John chapter 4. This is the woman at the well, and it's a very popular passage, and it's a great conversation Jesus has. But sometimes we miss what he said afterwards. And in fact, it was about a year and a half I was reading this passage, and all of a sudden it jumped out to me. This other part and how well it fit into what I'm talking about here. Jesus had talked to the woman at the well. She went off to Sychar to tell everybody what this man had told her, bring them to see him. The disciples came. They were out getting food. Jesus says to them, you are about to reap where you did not sow. In other words, there are other people who did the heavy lifting. You're going to get the easy pickings. He said, and in fact, he said, you say there are 6 months or 4 months, and then comes the harvest. He said, look, the field is ripe for harvest. And he's probably indicating that particular field. I don't think he meant that every field is always ripe for harvest, but that field was. And he's probably referring to the white robes coming across the field right then, being led by the woman at the well. And then he says this, so that the one who reaps and the one who sows can rejoice together. Do you see that? There are two different kinds of workers. There are sowers and there are reapers. There are two different seasons. There are sowing, gardening, if you will, and reaping. But there's one team. And frankly, when I look back at my life, I realize that I've really been a gardener most of my life, whether it was with radio or TV interviews or lectures or what I do in my public presentations. I'm gardening. I'm not harvesting. That's not my skill. And some of you are frustrated because you realize, boy, harvesting is what it's all about. That's what you think. That's the model of evangelism that we've received. But we're in a period of our time now where people need a lot more time during the gardening phase before they're ripe and ready to harvest. And when they're ready, of course, the harvest is easy because you bump up against the fruit and it drops into the basket. That's simple. The hard work is in the gardening. And since we probably need more gardeners than we need more harvesters, chances are pretty good that you are not a harvester, you're a gardener. And you've been frustrated because you're not a good harvester, you're not good at closing the deal. It makes you nervous, and I understand that. And so you sit on the bench, and you're not involved. You didn't realize that maybe you're just a gardener, and that's the role that you play. Harvesting is easy when the fruit is ripe. It's part of our job, as is part of our team, to do the gardening. Okay? So I'm a gardener. I'm not a harvester. I suspect most of you are as well. And as such, understanding that there's always a season of gardening that's necessary before the harvest, I have modified my own goal. My goal when I go out is not to try to win that person to Christ. It may not even be to get to the gospel, because sometimes there's all kinds of stuff that have to be dealt with before people will take the gospel seriously. I have a different goal, and I encourage you to adopt the same goal. Now, what is that goal? So whenever I speak to a non-Christian audience, I have a different goal in mind, and I let them know this goal right up front. I say to them, I'm here tonight because my life has been deeply changed by an ancient teacher. His name is Jesus of Nazareth. And 40 years ago or so, when I was a student at UCLA, I began to think about the claims that Jesus made about himself, about the nature of the world, and the claims that he made on my own life. And I began to ask a lot of questions. I even pushed back quite a bit too. But finally, I came to the conclusion that Jesus got it right. This is what I tell him. And so I began to follow him. Now I say, I'm not here today to convert you. That's not my goal. I just want to put a stone in your shoe. I just want to annoy you in a good way. And they all start laughing when I say this because they expect the Christian to annoy them. So I say, okay, I'm your guy, but you're going to thank me for it. I just want you walking out of the auditorium tonight, kind of something I said bothering you, sticking at you. I want you to see that Christianity is worth thinking about. And if I can put that stone in their shoe in the lecture that follows, then I'm happy. I'm going to do a little gardening because I know that we got a whole team of people and a lot of them are gardeners. And I'm going to do a little, you do a little, others do a little, and then when the fruit is ready to be harvested, God's going to bring a harvester, somebody who's capable, into their life to accomplish that particular goal. So what I want you to do is I want you to think about changing your goal, not to get them to sign on the dotted line, but just to do a little gardening, just to put a stone in their shoe. Okay? But I have something that you don't have that makes all the difference. I have a game plan. And that's the game plan that I would like to share with you during this course. And here's the promise that I'm going to give you. In this course, I am going to give you a game plan that will allow you to converse with confidence in any situation, no matter how little you know, or how knowledgeable or aggressive or even obnoxious the other person may be. Okay? It's a game plan that I order in a very particular way to make it simple to follow, yet is tailor-made for each individual. It follows Paul's directions in Colossians chapter 4, verse 5 and 6. And here's what he says there. He says, conduct yourselves with wisdom towards outsiders, making the most of the opportunity. So first he says, be smart, all right? Second, he says, let your speech always be with grace, seasoned as it were with salt. Be nice. How about that? Be smart, be nice. What a concept. Third thing he says, so that you know how to respond to each person. In other words, be tactical. Be smart, be nice, be tactical. Now, let me give you an example of what I mean about employing this kind of tactical approach, trying to put a stone in someone's shoe, not going for the gold, but following Paul's advice there in Colossians chapter 4. A number of years ago, I was having a conversation with a young lady in a film place. My wife and I, this is before our digital days, we were having some film produced, and I noticed that there was a pentagram hanging from her neck. Now, a pentagram is a 5-pointed star. It's usually an occultic symbol, but I wasn't exactly sure what it meant for her, so I asked her. I said, does that jewelry have religious significance? And she said, yes, it does. The 5 points stand for earth, wind, fire, water, and spirit. So, okay, I've heard this before. I wanted to know whether it really had religious significance for her, and I asked her that question. She said, yes, I'm a pagan. Now, I'm a trained professional, so I'm, cool and calm. My wife never heard that before. When she heard the lady refer to herself as a pagan, my wife started to chuckle, and then she caught herself, and she said, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to be rude. I just never heard anybody admit it before. She'd only heard the word pagan used when her girlfriends would call their kids in, get in here, a bunch of pagans kind of thing. But the woman wasn't offended. She said, well, no, this is a earth religion. And she began to explain how in her earth religion, they respect nature and life and the like. And I realized at the moment I was talking probably to a witch. And so I asked her, are you Wiccan? And she said, yes, I am. And then repeated this notion about respecting all life. Now, I know a little bit about witchcraft, and they do respect life, and that means that most of the time they're pro-life with regards to the abortion issue. So I asked her that. Are you pro-life with regards to the abortion issue? She said, no, I'm pro-choice. I said, isn't that a little bit unusual for a witch to be pro-choice? And she said, yeah, it is. And then she said this. She said, I know I could never do that, referring to abortion. I could never kill a baby. Now, those were her words. Now, at Stand to Reason, we have training material about abortion, and we train people to make the case that abortion kills an innocent human being, baby killing if you like, but we don't use that kind of language because we don't want people to think we're advancing our case by using slick rhetoric, baby killer, that kind of thing. But now I'm not the one who is using that language. It's the witch who is the pro-choicer who's identifying abortion as baby killing. And one thing I hope that you get out of our sessions together is you get the conviction that you have to listen to what people say because they're going to give you stuff you can use. And I'm listening. So am I going to use the word abortion anymore as we continue this conversation? No. I'm going to talk about baby killing because she's already legitimized the phrase. She said, I would never do that. I would never kill a baby. And then she said, why? She said, I wouldn't want anything bad to come back on me, kind of like a karma thing. What goes around comes around. Now, I don't know about you, but I think that's kind of an odd reason not to kill a baby. I'm not going to kill any. You never know what's going to happen to you when you kill babies. Maybe it's just a good idea not to kill babies. But I didn't take that tack. Instead, I said, well, maybe you won't kill babies, but maybe we should stop other people from killing babies. And she said, well, I think people should have a choice. Now, what is the choice we're talking about here? By her own admission, the choice to kill babies, right? And so I asked her that. You mean they should have a choice to kill babies? And she said, well, I think all things should be taken into consideration. I said, okay, well, what would be a good consideration to make it okay to kill a baby? And she immediately said, incest. Now, notice what's going on here. She is trotting out all the pro-choice slogans, right? But she's not thinking about it because she's already identified abortion as baby killing. So all of the pro-choice slogans are now slogans in favor of baby killing explicitly. And it's starting to sound a little weird to me, but she doesn't get it because she's just using slogans. People do this all the time. And Christians do this all the time as well. Okay? So I wanted to get her off her stride a little bit. I'm asking questions. Finally, I said, let me see if I understand your view. If I had a 2-year-old that was standing next to me right now who had been conceived by incest, on your view, then I should be allowed to kill this baby. Now, this question stopped her in her tracks. And she thought about it for a moment. And then she said, well, I have mixed feelings about that. Now, she meant it as a concession. I said, I hope so, at least mixed, She said it as a concession, but it got her thinking. And I noticed that the line is growing behind me, okay? So I realized that now I am interfering with her work product. And had I been of a different conviction, I might say, look it, folks, I haven't gotten to the gospel yet. Sit down, listen up, maybe you'll learn something. But I didn't do that. I realized that I'm a gardener. I do what I can. I put a stone in her shoe, and then I move on and trust the rest to the Lord. And that's what I did there. Now, I want you to notice something about that conversation. In that conversation, I asked 9 different questions. I used questions to begin the conversation, to gather information from her. I used questions to exploit what I thought was a weakness I saw in her view, her inconsistency. I also tried to show the natural consequences of her view. On her view, I should be allowed to kill this little child who had been conceived by incest. And, well, I like to say she was doing all the work because I wasn't doing any work. I was relaxed. But it turns out she wasn't doing any work either. She was relaxed. I was relaxed. There was no lines drawn on the sand. There's no dukes up. We weren't fighting each other. This is the power of using a tactical approach. This is exactly the way I want it. Now, at Stand to Reason, we have lots of different tactics. We have tactics with names like steamroller and taking the roof off and just the facts, ma'am, and suicide. But there's one tactic that really is the core of the game plan. It's the best tactic that I've ever used. It can be used with other tactics, but it's the easiest tactic imaginable to stop a detractor in their tracks, to turn the tables, to get them thinking, and to put you in the driver's seat of the conversation. And remember, that's the place we want to be when we talk about tactics. We want to be in the driver's seat. And the tactic has a name, and the name is Columbo. Named after the famous Lieutenant Columbo, who always showed up at the crime scene wearing a trench coat like this, all wrinkled and messed up, looked like he slept in it. Maybe he did. I don't know. I got mine at a Salvation Army. So if you ever get something that's Salvation Army, my wife taught me always check the pockets because you never know what you're going to... Wait a minute. Oh my gosh. Look at that. A cigar. See? Lieutenant Columbo, he always has a cigar. Look at it. This is just a plastic one, so don't worry. All right? No problems here. I actually hate cigars. Whenever I find one, I always destroy it by fire. Completely. I don't want anybody to stumble. Anyway, so Lieutenant Columbo shows up. He also has got a pad of paper, right? But he can't use his pad of paper. Why not? Because he doesn't have a pen or pencil. He's got to bum a pencil off of somebody else, right? And this guy walks around the crime scene, scratching his head, mumbling to himself. He doesn't look like he can think his way out of a wet paper bag. He's stupid, but he's stupid like a fox. Because at some point, he's going to pause. He's got a method to his madness. He'll pause and rub his brow like he's deep in painful thought and say something like, I don't know. There's something about this thing that bothers me. Do you mind if I ask you a question? And he asks the question, right? And then he gets the answer. You're very intelligent. And one more thing. And then he one more tings them to death, right? With question after question after question. Pretty soon people start getting upset. He says, I'm sorry. It's because I ask all these questions, but I can't help it. It's a habit. And this is a habit that you want to get into. The key to the Columbo tactic is that the Christian goes on the offensive in an inoffensive way with carefully selected questions to advance the conversation. Let me say that again because it's so important. The key to the Columbo tactic is that you go on the offensive, but you do it in an inoffensive way with carefully selected questions that could advance the conversation. Now, why questions? Well, for one, questions are polite. You ask questions of people, you draw them out. Okay? Interested is interesting, basically. So you're being courteous to people when you ask questions of them. Another thing is questions can buy you time. If you're not sure how to proceed, you're not sure where to go, well, you've asked these questions, you can be thinking about it. Another thing is questions get you valuable information so you know which direction to go. But the biggest value of using questions is it puts you in the driver's seat. You're in the driver's seat. The focus isn't on you, it's on the other person. You're the one who's in the driver's seat. You're managing the conversation, okay? So here's a simple guideline for you. If you hit a roadblock, ask a question. If you get into a difficult situation, ask a question. If you're not sure where to go next, ask a question. Now, Columbo is going to be your game plan. Remember, I promised you I was going to give you a game plan? That's Columbo. Okay? It's going to give you the ability to maneuver in conversations. Now, there are 3 different uses of Columbo, and over our course, we're going to talk about each one of those things. There are 3 parts, in other words, of the game plan. Here's the first part of the game plan, the first application of Columbo. The first part of our game plan is to gather information. Remember, when Columbo comes on the crime scene, he's got to gather information to be able to solve the crime, right? And that's the same thing that you're going to do. I want to emphasize this because I don't want you to get ahead of yourself. This is easy to do. We have a game plan that we're going to talk about. This is the first step. And what I mean by that is when you get in a circumstance where you'd like to have an impact for Christ, the first thing you think about doing is not getting to the gospel, not answering questions, not dealing with challenges, just gathering information, okay? You want to know the lay of the land before you can go further. Now, a question can be a casual conversation starter. It can buy you some valuable time, but most of the time you just need more information to know how to proceed further. I had a fellow that was sitting next to me in an airplane, and we got in a conversation. I was using the game plan, and it became obvious through our conversation that I was a Christian. He said he wasn't. Well, that's good to know. He said he used to be a Christian, but he's not anymore. Do you think that's important to know? I'd say so. In fact, he used to be a preacher's kid. I said, John, how do you used to be a preacher's kid? Did your dad die or something? He said, no, my dad didn't die. He's just no longer a preacher. In fact, he's no longer a Christian. Do you think that's good information? You think there's any baggage sitting here next to me? Can you imagine if I had just started out with the simple gospel with this guy, how he would have responded? Been there, done that, and it hurt. Okay? But because I asked him these questions and drew him out, I'm gathering information so that a kind of I can see a topography, spiritually speaking, and where he's at. And I realize that there are minefields there. And now I know how to respond so I can avoid those minefields. So our first step in the game plan is to gather information. And here's the model question that I'm going to give you. That model question is, what do you mean by that? This question, what do you mean by that, can be used in lots of different ways. It's the question I asked the witch in Wisconsin. I looked at her jewelry. I said, does that jewelry have spiritual significance? What do you mean by that is basically the question. Somebody says to you, there is no God. Well, you could start giving all kinds of arguments for the existence of God, but maybe be better to say, what do you mean by that? That is, what kind of God don't you believe in? Maybe you don't believe in a God that's up on a throne somewhere with a long beard in outer space. I mean, I don't believe in that kind of God either. Maybe they don't believe in a God of organized religion, but they believe in some kind of force. Maybe they believe in nothing but the natural realm. You can't go further effectively if you don't know what that is, okay? Once a student said, everything's relative. How do you respond to that? Well, I would never go after the issue itself without asking some questions first, like, what do you mean by relative? I know what it means, but I don't know that he knows what it means. And what do you mean by everything? I mean, if everything means everything, isn't the statement everything is relative part of everything? Which would make that statement what? Also relative. You see the problem there. Once I had a call on my radio show and somebody said, what's a good book on Buddhism? I said, why do you want a good book on Buddhism? See, that's what do you mean by that question? And he said, well, I have a friend that I work with who's a Buddhist and I want to know how to share Christ with him. I said, well, don't get the book. That's going to cost you money. You got to read it. And it's probably not his Buddhism anyway. I suggest that you go and you grab your friend and you take him to the local watering hole and buy him a latte or something like that and ask him, I'm a Christian. I understand you're a Buddhist. I don't know anything about Buddhism. Can you tell me? And you're going to get an education on Buddhism from that individual. Notice that is also a, what do you mean by that? Tell me your Buddhism. So there are lots of ways to use this question. Just one thing to keep in mind, though. Sometimes when you ask, what do you mean by that? You're going to get what I call the sounds of silence response, which means they're not going to know what to say. Now, you think that they would know what they're thinking about and what their beliefs actually entail, but it's not always the case. Sometimes they don't know, and you're giving them an opportunity to clarify their view. And they won't be able to advance their view based on ambiguity now because you're drawing them out with this question. It's a question you can ask all day long until the cows come home, and there's no pressure on you at all. If there's any ambiguity in the response, go ahead and ask more questions. Have them spell the issue out for you, if they can. A great example of this is the problem of evil. It comes up all the time, okay? And it catches Christians flat-footed. It's a great spot for your first question. People say, what about all the evil in the world? I say, what about it? Well, doesn't that create a problem for you? Well, what exactly is the problem? You see how what I'm doing is I'm just parrying for a moment and forcing them to be more clear about their own objection. Now, you might be thinking, well, I can ask those two questions. I don't know where to go from there, and there is more detail there. But I'll tell you, when I get into it a little bit, there's a problem with the problem of evil as an objection against Christianity. Because at some point, I'm going to ask, what do you mean by evil? And I know what they're going to say. They're going to talk about murders and rapes and tortures and that kind of stuff. And then I say, wait a minute, you just gave me examples of evil. You didn't tell me what you meant by evil. Why would you give those things as examples of evil and not something like kindness or mercy as examples of evil? So what my questions are meant to do at this point, just the first question, is to get to the core of what they mean by evil. And somewhere down the line, they're going to say, well, it's because things aren't the way they're supposed to be. Now, it might be occurring to you that if there is a way that they are supposed to be, there's got to be a supposer for that, which is starting to lean towards the existence of God on this issue. I don't have time to develop this anymore, but what I want you to see is even on a tough issue like the problem of evil, you can start leading with those first information gathering questions. What do you mean by that, or some variation? And it can really give you an advantage. Gives you more information, it gives you time to think, it gives you an opportunity to reposition yourself in the argument in some way. Look at what you can accomplish with this first step of the Columbo tactic, which is the first step of our game plan. First, it immediately engages the non-believer in an interactive way. It's great, okay? Second, it shows a genuine interest in the other person's view. That's polite. Third, it forces that person to think more carefully about exactly what he does believe. Fourth, it gets you a free education. And finally, think of it, there's no pressure on you. You're in the driver's seat, okay? This is something very simple to do. So here's what I want you to do. This next week, I want you to focus in your conversations with other people that you hope will have a spiritual impact. I want you to focus simply on Columbo question number 1. Be a student. Be a student of other people's point of view. Okay, so what did we cover in our first session together? We talked about restoring that missing piece, right? That piece that goes from the content to the conversation. And if without that piece, conversations are going to be difficult. How do you get started? We've talked about that particular issue. Next, we talked about the tactical approach in general, the skill of maneuvering in conversations, and how important that skill is for us to be good ambassadors for Christ with knowledge, wisdom, and character. The third thing we said is I suggested that you rethink your approach to this whole project, to think of yourself as a gardener, not a harvester, and to modify the goal, therefore, in your conversations. So you're not worried about trying to get to the end of the game, get people to sign on the dotted line. That might happen in some cases, but you'll see. Don't worry about that at first. Just simply try to what? Put a stone in their shoe. Try to get them thinking. Maybe move them forward just a little bit if you can. And finally, I introduced you to the game plan that will help you accomplish that goal. I call it the Columbo tactic. That is using questions to move gracefully in any conversation. Keeps you relaxed, keeps you protected. So the first step of the game plan, you gather information, use some form of the question, what do you mean by that? Simple. You can do this. Now, in our next session together, I'll introduce you to the second step of the game plan. See you then.
Think?
There was a lot of information there, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's the reason I think we'll go through why don't we take 5 minutes and get something to drink, then we'll come back and we'll go through the notes. And that way I think we can talk through some of it, but yeah, it sounds
Hard to execute that
yeah.
situation.
Well, I think
You didn't say it takes practice.
well, yeah, being able to,
Instead of you explaining, the other person is the one explaining himself.
until they clearly define what their position is, it's impossible to defend your position against it, right?
You're shooting like everywhere.
So,
You don't even know if you're shooting the right target. And there might be over there, and you're shooting over here. Right.
Well,
So it's ineffective. Right.
well, actually, one of the things I've heard others talk about is the fact that if you get on the offensive too quick and you start trying to defend against, let's say, I think it was Daniel Wallace I was listening to, was talking. He goes out and preaches against Jehovah's Witnesses all the time with their book. And he said he found early on that he would be telling them things about Jehovah's Witnesses that they didn't know. And so he was making them into better Jehovah's Witnesses instead of winning them to Christ by educating them on their belief. And it's like, don't do that, make them tell you what they believe, and then you can counter only the things that they believe in. And so
They don't believe, you don't have to.
yeah, you don't have to worry about the ones that they don't believe in. So
He's pointing out what we learned in the previous stuff is that you have to listen.
yeah.
You have to listen. Sometimes we're so anxious to jump in.
Yeah, that's right. Tell them the gospel.
That's right. And then you're going,
Yeah.
Well, our evangelism model is essentially preaching,
yeah,
but it's like we're not preachers.
no.
We're really listeners and talkers, and I think that's just the unfortunate thing about the Western evangelical model is go do evangelism, right? And it's like, I'm not an evangelist, but I can educate. Yeah. So we can keep going. You guys want to get something to drink? And then yeah, I need a little water.
It's in there and he lets you.
There's a Kindle version. Well, this is the Kindle version of the worksheet. So
You just remember, what do you mean by that? I think,
well, and all the different variations of that question, and it's a very disarming question because one, you're actually showing interest in whatever their perspective is, which actually plays to people's egos a little bit.
Just gonna say it does.
But it also is very useful because you really have no idea what they mean by that until they tell you. You can't know. So
Everybody gave examples of what do you mean by that, because what do you mean by that sounds kind of cold.
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Like, could you explain to me a little better what you mean by that?
well, it's the model question,
Different
right?
variations of that.
But you have to show that you're interested.
But it takes practice on rewording a question using, but that's the question you have in your mind. How do I say that with what that person's just asked me? And then but there's no substitute for practice. He has a couple of scenarios in the workbook that we'll talk through, but yeah.
Because every situation is a little different. And if they always would be copied, this would be, you got going this way all the time, you might be able to get good.
Page 2, going deeper.
Their personality too, I want to say it.
Right there. So.
Yeah, I feel I'm very slow. Like when somebody says something, it took me like a long time to process what they are talking about, and then when I think of that, they already they are the topics.
But I think that's the power of the question, though. It buys you time. I mean, if you're always just thinking of, what did they mean by what they just said, and asking them a question that draws that out, it buys you time to kind of gather yourself. And I think that's probably the first use that he's
I guess you could,
stressing.
instead of you trying to process what do they mean by that, just ask them what
What do they mean by that?
I don't understand what you mean.
I don't understand. I don't understand what you mean. Can you explain it again?
Not American. It's like you can get by with it.
Yeah.
Like, I don't get it.
Well, you guys don't recognize the Columbo thing. It was a 1980s TV program.
What's Columbo?
And
He was so funny. Like that.
Because he acted like such an
You
idiot.
acted like an idiot.
but his idiocy was disarming to the other
He's
person.
asking the pointed questions.
Then he sits down there and then he thinks,
Yeah,
oh, well now,
I never thought
this
of that.
happened, and then
Explain me a little more about that.
But the other point he was making is, at a certain point, people are going to start getting agitated if you ask them too many questions. And then just apologize and move on. Move on. And that's also a skill. I'm kind of like a dog with a bone. Once I get a hold of it, I don't let it go. So, but we have to learn to let go, because once their attitude has shifted, they're no longer responsive, and now it's over.
It's over, and they're just trying to get away.
Well, the harder you push, the more resistance you're going to get, and then it's completely non-productive. The idea is you want productive conversation, and so, yeah, it's good. So, all right, so we'll kind of scan through this first section. So he starts with this going deeper, and I thought it was interesting. Apologetics have a questionable reputation with some Christians. Well, obviously, the topic itself, even the term, is what people get agitated about. But the idea is that we're trying to build a defense that we can use. Go down. So in addition to the image problem, apologists face another barrier, and the truth is that effective apologists nowadays require even more than answers, because people are resistant to the Christian message more in the West than it was in the past. So it's too easy for some people just to ignore the facts, because if you come on with Christianity right away, a lot of people just shut you down, they don't even listen. That's the problem. It's not that you're doing it wrong, but it's not the right approach for them. So that's, I think, where he's going with the questions. So I thought Matthew 10:16 was a good place. Let's see if I can pull it up real quick. Because what he has in the notes is a lot of the Bible verses and some background. It's yeah. So he's sending out. This is when he's sending out his disciples, right? And he tells them that he tells them this, right? Behold, I am sending you out like sheep. This is the disciples in the midst of wolves. Be wary and wise as serpents, and be innocent as doves. Need to change my translation. So be aware that as Christians, we're going into situations that are going to be, well, they want to embarrass us or hurt us in many cases. So I'd suggest the more excellent way, Jesus said, that when you find yourself a sheep amid wolves, be innocent and shrewd. And this approach, this tactical approach, even though real spiritual warfare is going on, our engagement should look more like diplomacy than engaging in battle, right? You got your Bible open, Judy? Read 2 Corinthians. D-Day as in World War II, right? 2 Corinthians 5:20. So our need for tactics concerns our commission to be effective ambassadors for Christ. And this is what Paul's talking about in 2 Corinthians. Second Corinthians 5:20. What's wrong with your app? You're so slow.
All right, 5:20. We are therefore Christ's ambassador, as though God were making his appeal through us. We implore you on Christ's behalf, be reconciled to God.
Yeah, so this is Paul talking to the Corinthians, that when we're talking to anybody, we have to speak as if we're acting as ambassadors to Christ. And so what, scroll. You're zoomed in so much I can't see anything. Go up. Scroll up.
It's like though God is making appeal through us when you're talking to other people.
I need to see one more line. Okay, there, it's good enough. So it's the three categories of being an ambassador, which we talked about it when we did our class, but knowledge, you gotta know something if you're going to engage, okay?
You need to know what you're trying to advance.
And then you have to have a way to apply that knowledge. That's wisdom or application. And then you have to have the right character you have to know your audience, right? And these three things are works in progress depending on the circumstance. Character means meeting the person where they're at with the behavior that's going to be responsive to them. But I like these three. And obviously we talked about knowledge in the first class we did, but now in tactics it's all about the approach, how you apply that knowledge in an artful way. I lost my place here. Okay. So the skills play a part in the effective engagement that we have with a non-believer. I think that's one thing that I liked about his approach is recognizing the non-believer is not where you're at, right? So you have to lead them. Go ahead.
Or his example, like during the plane ride. So you just don't blurt out your gospel presentation because this dude was even like, oh, I used to be a Christian. You need to know that. You need to know that he has some background of that. And you have to question like why he ended up that way. Yes. Before you even like convince him that, because he was not convinced anymore. He used to, but not anymore.
Well, you have to figure out where his problems are and only address the problem.
Yeah.
That's I think where the weakness for me has always been is I always want to address the strengths of the argument that I have. Mm-hmm. But if that's not the weakness of the other person, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
Or if they've already ignored that evidence, you have to look at what is going to be effective to them, or you're just talking.
I kind of like that debate. It's like, oh, this evidence, this, and history is like, I don't accept this as evidence. So it's like, and you keep on pushing, according to this historian, this he doesn't accept this as evidence. What's the point? You keep going back there.
The very common thing is like, oh, why when you get asked and you said because the Bible said so. Well, I don't believe the Bible. So you can't use that.
Or even quoting scripture.
Yeah.
It's not effective if the person doesn't believe in the Bible. But you can use the wisdom that's in the scripture. Don't use the address.
Yeah.
And you're.
I want to ask some real quick. As I was going through this chapter, I wrote these scriptures in the back, and there are ones that talk about the veil covers their minds and their hearts, and Satan, the god of this world, has blinded their minds so that they don't believe. So I think we have to be prayed up, and asking the Lord as we're doing this. Remove the veil from their minds, Lord. Remove the veil from their understanding. Remove the veil from their hearts. Because I think that's the key. I mean, that's a big key.
Prayer is so powerful. I think, anytime you engage, you have to be in prayer in your mind with God. So, because God, you have to give control over your conversation to God and know that He's going to lead your path. That's the modifying of the question, what do you mean by that? Right. We can't do that on our own, but practice helps. But God will use our practice to prepare us for the engagement. So he says the second skill is the artful method or tactical wisdom, which is what we're talking about. So read 1 Peter 3:15.
Okay, but in your heart, revere Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have. But do this with gentleness and respect.
Yeah, that's the first line of my book. Be prepared to give a defense, right? And that's in the context of what Peter's talking about. He's like, when people ask you, you have to be prepared to tell them what the source of the hope that's in you is, right? So the strategy involves the big picture and the large-scale operation, one's positioning prior to the engagement. You're preparing, right? So I use the term strategy in reference to the tremendous resources of knowledge available to us to adequately prepare to give an account for the hope that is in us. So what Greg is encouraging us that we need to do, what we did in the previous class, is most engagements are going to be more than one and done. And if you know you're engaging with somebody, as you ask questions, don't be afraid to disengage, go get some education, and then come back and re-engage. In fact, he'll talk about that in the next couple sessions. So gather information, but you don't have to go all the way. You don't have to worry about going all the way. You get as far as you need to go, and then go get the knowledge, and then come back and re-engage. So in our case, Christianity has a strategic superiority. I mean, our worldview is the only one that seems to work in the world, because our ideas can hold up under the serious scrutiny. And in fact, our worldview has been challenged more than any other worldview in itself. Okay.
So I guess the thing though is you need to formulate in your own self, like, what are you supposed to say? What is the hope that's in you?
Yeah.
I think it depends on the situation. Like, for example, like I have this co-worker who has a problem with the relationship with her daughter. Like, the daughter does not want to do anything with her. Like, we completely separate from her, and it's so hard for the mother.
Yeah.
So I have to, like, use it. So I'm able to introduce God.
Yeah.
So I said, you know what? There's nothing impossible with God. How about let's pray? Perhaps God will answer our prayer.
Yeah.
And we prayed. And then, after some time, I don't know what happened. They reconciled. And I said, see, God is...
No, but that's using the circumstance. And I think it's that recognizing whatever the hole is and then trying to help them fill that hole. But I think, Judy, going back to what you were saying, is you have to clearly define what the hope of Christ means to you. It really means having your own story. We all have a story of how we became followers of Jesus, and we need to have that very refined, so when someone asks us, we can share whatever part of that that's you don't tell this story, but the part of your story that is
Kind of
relevant to whatever you're talking about.
Yeah.
But I believe that most Christians don't do that. They don't spend time really refining with words what Christ means for them and how they got there. And I think when we don't do that, then we're not prepared. We're not ready to...
I think the kind of approach is dependent on if the person is asking, how do you become a Christian?
Yeah, but you need to have that though.
I know, but
you need to have that in advance.
You don't have to have all this kind of scenario because it's different.
Oh, I agree. I was just referring to the 2 Peter, where he says you should be prepared to give a defense for the hope that's in you. But Annie's right. It's like, whatever that line of issue that person is having, God's put them in front of you. This is your mission, is the person that's you're facing. So recognizing what their problem is and then weaving it in.
In earlier slide, you also said, be careful with using the tactics because it's not dangerous. Tactics is a shortcut, and you may win the argument, but you lost
Not the person. Not the person.
Lost the war.
versus strategy or strategical long term, you gain the advantage.
Well, and you're absolutely right. And I think I've seen the worst of the Christian approach, where they want to win in every argument, but you don't win that way. It just doesn't. It rarely happens that way. But you can actually push someone further away from Christ instead of bring them closer.
Really, those that you win, they're already like seated.
Yes.
There's already something in them. That's why they said yes. But it's not like you just introduce and they said yes. There's no. Those are like.
But I like his stone in the shoe approach. I've used it too, right? Where you just want to annoy them in a good way. You want to stimulate them to think, and then that's the opening for the Holy Spirit, right? To convict them and maybe go farther. Where if you push them too hard, then it actually pushes them away, right? So I think that's one thing, and he'll talk about this as we go through the different sessions. You have to know when to disengage, and I'm not good at that, but it's one of those skills that we can learn. That when you have someone on their heels, instead of going for the kill shots, sometimes you should let them recover so that they can have firm foundation to actually receive what it is that you're trying to share with them. If you're just going to push them over, you've just knocked them down. You haven't actually helped them. So it says, where are you? To be, oh yeah, so our strategy concerns the content, information, and the reasons why someone should believe in Christianity, and describes the world accurately, or why Christianity describes the world accurately, all of which fall under the heading of either defensive or offensive apologetics. And I think we understand, I don't like the term apologetics, but you're either defending against challenges or you're trying to be proactively and share what you're about. Someone else want to read one? Connie, you want to read?
Defensive apologetics, answer that one.
Yeah.
Direct challenges to Christianity. For example, in response to attacks on the Bible's authority, it answers the problem of evil and addresses Darwinian macro evolution.
Yeah, so that's like defensive, or people put up a challenge and then we're defending against these false claims, right?
Those are attacks to Christianity, so you're defending against apologetics.
So, Mom, you want to read two?
Offensive apologetics makes a positive case for Christianity. For example, A, it provides evidence for the existence of God. Or B, it supplies evidence for the resurrection of Christ. Or C, it represents evidence of fulfilled prophecy.
When the example Annie used would be offensive apologetics, effectively using prayer. It's like, this is evidence God's real because prayer worked, right? Judy, you want to read C?
Strategic concerns include a number of contemporary issues. The radical relativism and skepticism of postmodernism that denies the existence of objective truth. These would include moral relativism. All moral truth is individual or group-based, and religious pluralism. All religions are equally valid and true for those who believe. The competing views of Jesus' identity, the problem of evil, the ethical issue of abortion, homosexuality, human cloning, doctor-assisted suicide, and the nature of marriage, the historical accuracy of the gospel.
Yeah, so those are all the common problems that we face with people, right? So spending time thinking about how you'd engage helps you when it's put in front of you. With the Wiccan? Yeah. It's amazing how many people are pro-choice, but not for themselves. And that shows that they have some sort of a moral dilemma with it. And it is something that it can be exploited, but the question is, be careful not to turn them off by exploiting their weakness. It's that balance.
A lot of that on abortion got riled up because they're taking away a right. I mean, they don't care about anything, but they're taking away a right of mine. Get real. Get real.
Someone want to try reading?
In contrast, tactics literally refer to the art of arranging, deploying one's assets, the details of the engagement. Tactics, simply put, are about how to maneuver in conversations,
allowing us to use our knowledge in creative ways to
Choreograph.
choreograph the particulars of our response. 3. Style our response to objections. 4. Employ specific method in addressing attacks. 5. Guide us with sound reasoning, clear thinking, and aggressive advocacy.
I want Judy needs to show you that Gallagher video. Sonny will appreciate that. It's a joke video that we watched last night about the English language.
English, how different.
It's a really good. It's a really good gig. We might have to show that at the end.
English language.
Oh, can you put it there? You have a YouTube over there.
We not right now. Let's finish our class first. So it's this idea of how you maneuver your way through the conversation. That's really what the tactical approach is all about. So,
Yeah, using which weapons do you use based on your arsenal?
well, and you're trying not to be abrasive, right? The magic of his method is that you're trying to engage instead of dominate. Because using these questions the right way, you can embarrass somebody to the point you can drive them into the ground.
Well, yeah.
That's not
Like
the.
they don't know the answer.
You make-
Because
make them
they
look
make
like
an
a fool.
assertion and they don't have reasoning for it. And that, yeah, you embarrass them because they don't know how to answer your question.
Well, sometimes it depends on the person, because sometimes it's actually worse for a certain person because it's like they've never really thought of it. So once you trigger that, they start thinking about it. So yeah, it kind of depends on the person.
I think you have to kind of weigh that because, yeah, you can embarrass them really. Especially if they don't have no answer, just because. Like the answer is just because.
Well, that's the approaching.
We call it in Philippines, basta. I don't have reason. I'm just because.
But that's grace, right? I'm going to give you grace because I don't want to just steamroll you. I want to push you to the edge that makes you stimulate, and then let's get together later this week for a coffee and we'll finish this conversation or something, right? I mean, if it's a friend. If it's not a friend, let the next person do the gardening.
Understand that like one or two questions that's where they end up. But if you keep on going and pushing for more, that's kind of against becoming like, yeah, you're just putting them to the ground. But one or two, I don't think that's not offensive.
You have to gauge the
I mean,
person. Well, we see this even in our own interactions. You know, I know the answer, so I'm kind of cheating a little bit. I know the answer, and I know they don't. And I can expose them not knowing in a way that embarrasses them. By if you ask the questions in the right way, you can show them to be a fool. And that's not really very kind.
That's not the thing, but you want to ask the question so they think about it.
Yeah.
Sometimes they really haven't really thought of it.
But the key is ask the question so you don't make them look like a fool. So you have to balance it a little. Yeah, you want them to walk away thinking positively instead of only being upset about the way you made them feel. Because if they only feel upset, then you didn't accomplish anything. That's what Julimar was just talking about. If you anger them and emotion becomes the driver, then reason is no longer relevant.
Reasonable.
When you discuss topics or really stuff with your friend, it's better to discuss it with full stomach than empty stomach.
Yes, you're right.
Yeah.
It's usually easier to interject it on a meal. Yeah. So, you know.
Yeah, I know it's there's well, it's like that mild distraction. It can be at work even if you're working, if you're doing like physical labor or you're working, you're engaged in work, and that conversation goes freely because you have something else that's kind of focuses your body. Where, if you have a growl in your stomach, you're more focused on the thing that's not in the room than what the conversation is. So, go to the next one. So, Walter, you want to just read B?
Clever commander has advantage over a superior opponent. So that's the tactical maneuvering.
Yeah, so this is what we were just talking about. It's like, if you have the information, you can overwhelm a superior opponent. That's what we're talking about. It doesn't matter how many degrees they have or who they think they are. If you have the right approach, you can actually disarm even a superior force. Supposed.
Like that one that we used for the apologetics class is like, all those statements that you just said, which one of those can you test by science?
That was J.P. Moreland.
It's just a single question.
When J.P. Moreland was being engaged by the atheist, he was going through this long list of reasons he didn't believe in Christianity.
It's basically a bunch of statements that
But none of them were testable by his own scientific method.
if you can test it by science, it's just full of hot hair.
So yeah, I think, you, like I said, you can do things in a way that can overwhelm the superior force, is what Greg's talking about. And it can be positive or negative, so we got to be sure how our approach is. Annie, you want to read C?
Tactics are not tricks or slick tools. Clever plots to destroy non-Christian, forcing them to submit to your point of view, attempt to belittle or humiliate, or add notches on your spiritual belt.
Yeah, so I think that the last one, I think, is one that too often we tend to get, winning the argument is somehow a badge of honor, but it doesn't actually win you anything, right? So I think what Greg is trying to stress is that this approach is very effective, but it can be very ineffective if you use it with the wrong motives, right?
No, I think the way to get better at this is to practice it, because you're not going to know the situation that you're going to be in and prepare for that. The only thing that he's trying to tell you is ask questions. Yep. So you gather information of what their objections are, what they're standing about on this particular issue, and then that's your first.
Well, and you got to engage. And in fact, we're going to get to it in a second. He's going to go through scenarios, and then we're going to fail, and then he'll come back and show us how we should have engaged those scenarios. Because the key is, practice will prepare you for the next one, and don't be if you fail, the person is already a long ways from God. You have not hurt their situation at all by engaging them. So it said tactics are to help us manage or not manipulate, control, not coerce, and he has a third one. Fight, navigate through the minefields. I liked what he was talking about. The guy that was on the plane next to him had baggage. If you don't know that baggage, you're going to mess it up.
Sure, like, yeah, I've done that.
You know,
it didn't hurt. Then what do you do?
But I like his vision of staying in the driver's seat. It's like, instead of being the expert, let them be the expert. Let them talk. But you're in complete control of the conversation, because you're engaging them and pulling it out of them. And they don't even know that you're actually directing the conversation, because the next question you ask is the next thing they're going to answer. You're actually guiding the conversation in the direction you want it to go. That's what he means by driver's seat.
People are always flattered.
Yeah. They're the one talking. Yes. But it gets you off the you're not the one explaining, so you're just listening. That's easier. That's easier.
Much easier.
Unless you're a talker. Unless you want to talk all the time.
Well, go to the next page. Yeah. Let's do the reflect for a moment. So I like this quote. I don't know Hugh Hewitt. I don't know who this is, but he has a bunch of quotes from this guy in his book. It said, "It is not the Christian life to wound, embarrass, or play one-upmanship with colleagues, friends, or even opponents, but it's the common vice that anyone can easily fall into." You know, But it's not, you're not being Christian if you're doing that, is I think what Hewitt is trying to get across. Well, the sad thing about aggressive evangelism is it's done as much damage as it's done good, right? And we have plenty of evidence in our Western world of that. I know China has had its share of that. I'm sure the Philippines has as well.
Well, generally, especially if the person that you're engaging with is like knows that you're coming out of concern, like you're concerned for them.
It's for themselves.
It's what you're saying. Even if they don't like what you're saying, they know that what you're saying, that you're engaging them is because out of you're concerned for them. It will not be received as negative.
No, but the thing is,
Even if they don't
you gotta know if they're Christian or not. Why are you gonna talk to them if they're already a Christian about Christianity?
There's a lot that says they're Christian, but
No, but
with a
you
name.
need to know that. You need to know that. It's like, you have to converse with a
But they're
person.
just
That's like a
cultural.
plane ride, kind of conversation.
Somebody as if, you know, and it just drove people.
Well,
There's a different approach for a random interaction and versus a person that you know.
Yeah.
Yes.
well,
Generally, for the person that you know, if they know that it's out of care that you're
Well, even the random person, this method works because you don't know their situation. The aggressive evangelism, I actually think, is a failed approach. I think asking 2 questions in that evangelistic opportunity lays the foundation so you can go the next step. If you just blurt out the canned whatever talking
How
point,
can you do that? How can they do that if I don't want to listen?
well, if you don't want to listen, you're the wrong person. That's the whole thing is, if you don't want to listen, then I don't need to talk to you.
No, I know, but how can they be aggressive when I don't want to listen to them?
Oh, I that's the whole point, where a question can draw somebody in. You see, Living Waters, Ray Comfort, for better, for worse, I love the way he draws people into conversation. He goes out on the boardwalk and he'll interview people, and he uses questions in a really powerful way just to engage them. It's like, do you think you're a good person? And then he walks through why they're not a good person and why he's not a good person.
He asked first if they're okay to be interviewed and asked and stuff like that. And then they said, be on the camera. They said, fine. Of course, they like to be in the camera. People like to be in the camera.
But he's a very direct evangelist, but he uses questions to build his foundation, to learn something about the person. He has a canned message that he gives everybody, but he always builds it with questions.
Yeah, it's generally establishes, okay, you have a problem. You're not a good person. That's what you
He
think
would
you
always
are.
say too that, I love you, that's why I'm telling you this. I won't like Cliff. It's like, I don't want to do this. It's like, you guys are nasty to me. And the only reason I'm doing this is because I care for you. I need to tell you.
Yeah, Cliff is another street evangelist.
In Austin, in University of Austin.
Seeing the sun go
Oh, yeah,
out.
it gets abused over there.
But I think that's the message that we don't always do a very good job of getting across. And I think through questions, you have the opportunity to open that up. The reason I care is that I care, okay?
care, I won't be here.
Well, they'll accuse us of being bigoted and exclusive. And it's like, if I was, I wouldn't talk to you. Because the only reason I'm talking to you is because I want better for you. And if you don't want better for you, I still want better for you, right? I mean, that's the Christian way. We want better for other people regardless.
So that's a good approach.
Well,
And but that's not normal.
no, it's not the one that they always use, no.
That's okay. It's their choice. People have choices.
And what's his name?
He's not.
That Christian, what's that? He said, help me to,
Master skills.
said, help me to accept when you did everything and they don't want to do it,
That's what I want.
give you peace. His prayer is, Lord, give me peace to accept what my family desires.
That's not in Pilgrim's Progress.
I know, I think it is there, but I've read the whole darn book. It's not in there.
Are you sure?
I've been searching for it because I want to use it in my book, and I cannot find the quote. So I don't know where we heard that from, but it's not Pilgrim's Progress.
It's in the movie.
Maybe it's in the movie version. It's a great prayer.
It's in the movie version, but the movie kind of
Well, there's got to be a basis for it. It's a great prayer. I wish it was in there. I'm good.
I've listened to the book.
I cannot find it.
Well, it's at the end. You do this. It's at the end.
Oh, I have a Kindle. I can do a word search. I can find it. I can't find it.
Maybe it's word phrase.
It must be worded different. If you guys can find it, I would love it. But in Pilgrim's Progress, Christian is at the end, right? He's the main character. Do you know the book Pilgrim's Progress? And he has this prayer to God, give me peace to accept the decisions of my loved ones. That if they're not going to be in the celestial city with me, just give me the peace to accept it. And I think that's really, in the end, we need that from God, because
it's hard.
You want the best for your family, but well. So ambassador skill, page 9. When discussing controversial issues, be careful not to resort to slick rhetoric, empty slogans, loaded words, ridicule, or name calling, because the other side's going to do that. So
yeah, and it's easy to fall into that too, because when your temper gets like out of control.
Well, because we have them just as much as they do, but the thing is, if you don't understand what you're saying, you better not say it to start with. But the point, you're not going to persuade a critic by throwing slogans at them. The only way you
like what? Like, oh, the Bible said so.
Yeah, the Bible said so. You're a sinner. Well, if I don't know what a sin is, what does that mean?
What do you mean?
What do you mean by that?
What do you mean by that?
But we have to be careful, because it's easy. I fall guilty that we toss out that phrase that without thinking about what it. And it's almost it's like the conversation shutdown, right? You get back into a corner and you have a couple phrases that always come to your mind that just shut down the conversation, right? But it turns it into a fight, and that's what we don't want to do. All right, so I'm going to skip the Wiccan interaction. Skip to, let's go ahead and go to going deeper, page 10. All right, so let's do the interactive. Yeah, that's page 11. So that he has what he calls the 10-second window. So
me and Sonny is like the 10 second already left.
No, let's do these as a group.
Let's do this as a group.
I'm going to read through these, and then I'm going to skip to the end, because he has a second part, and we'll try it, which is going to be on page 19, if you want kind of the second part of this. But I think he builds the scenarios pretty good here. So let's go scenario 1, if you can get it on the page. Okay, let me just read it. So the scenario is there is no God, right? So the scene is you're at a dinner party at your friend's home, and some of your close friends from the church, all right? The conversation ranges naturally over a number of interesting spiritual topics. So you're settled in, and then suddenly, to your surprise and embarrassment, the host's 15-year-old son announces with some belligerence that he does not believe in God anymore. It's simply not rational, he says. There's no proof. No one had any idea he'd been moving in this direction, and there's a stunned silence. So the challenge is your opportunity will pass very quickly. You have only a few seconds to initiate further dialogue with this teenager, right? But you want to do in a way that is productive and will help everyone in the room to reflect intelligently on the issue. What will you say?
What do you mean by that?
What do you mean by that?
But there is no proof. It's like,
he said, like, I don't believe in God. There's no proof. What do you mean by that?
Where did you get that
Where'd you get that idea?
How did you end up with that conclusion?
That's probably the right phrasing. How did you come to that conclusion? Because you know he was Christian and now he's moved away from Christianity. So what has made you think that?
Or yeah,
Why
what?
do you think it's irrational?
So
Or even you can even do it in a two-part question. It's like, so what do you consider to be rational? And then why is belief in God not rational, right? You take it in two steps.
that's
Or, why do you think there's no proof?
Why do you think there's no proof?
Well, the thing is, I think you need to pick one of the questions because there's so much. I think the first thing is what's the rational thing? Because you have to figure out where they're.
He has two different like sentences.
Well, there's actually he makes three claims.
What's the claim?
three claims.
There's no, I don't believe in God.
It's not rational.
It's not
It's
rational.
irrational, and there's no proof.
There's no God, and there's no proof.
I mean, God could still exist even if it wasn't rational. God can exist even if there's no proof. So there's three things here. So you have to pick one to engage, and I think rational is the right one to pick because until you can have a rational conversation, you can't have a conversation.
If one is not rational, then there's no.
So you have to somehow talk him down the path of what is reasonable and rational before you can have a reasonable and rational conversation. So how would you do that?
Well, so he says there is no proof. It's not rational. So what made you say that it is irrational to believe in God?
No.
So you probably have sun silence, I'm guessing.
Yeah,
from the
he has to
teenager.
think. It's like, okay, how do I answer this now?
The answer probably, the quickest answer, the typical slogan, there is no proof.
Well,
That's what the typical answer
That's
of
true.
atheist.
So
Yeah, that's
That's
true.
why it's irrational, because there is no proof for it.
But remember, this is a 15-year-old child. So you have to draw the information out of them. I think you need to do it in more than one step. Well, exactly. I mean, I'd want to start with, so where did you get this idea? And then he'll tell you something. And then, so what is rational? Now, define rational, because that's his word. And once you've defined it, now you can build on it. So what's not rational about belief in God? Then he'll go to his proof, right? Then he'll go right to there's no proof. Then you have to ask him, well, what proof would you consider as evidence for God? You don't give him proof. You're wasting your time.
No, you don't give a proof. You ask them what.
But a 15-year-old child would probably answer that question, and then you could give some evidence toward that and bring it around. But you only got, like I said, this is a 15-second conversation. So you're going to have 2 or 3 questions, and he's going to have rebuttals, and then it's gone. So that's a good one, because you can see yourself in this awkward situation. Or you can see yourself out to lunch with a friend you've gone to church with for 20 years, and they tell you that they're suddenly an atheist. It can happen. I've actually had that happen, but see, I wasn't a very good Christian at that stage, so I didn't have anything to respond. It's like, okay, if you, whatever.
Okay, but float your boat.
All right.
I respect you.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't think my answer was any better than that. All right, so that two. All right, so religious pluralism. This is an interesting one. Okay, so the scene is, it's the night of your weekly Bible study group. Well, this will be fun. During the discussion of the Sunday sermon on the Great Commission, a newcomer remarks, "Who are we to say Christianity is better than other religions? I think the essence of Jesus' teaching is love." I've heard this. "The same as all religions, not telling other people how to live and believe." The rest of the group fidgets awkwardly and says nothing. So this is that all religions basically are the same.
I asked
So let me read the challenge, and then let's see where we go. So the challenge is you're concerned about your friend's statement, obviously, and want to say something, but you're also concerned about not sounding narrow-minded or intolerant. Okay? No one else is speaking up, and you have only a few seconds before you lose the opportunity to represent God's view on other religions. What will you say? So, okay. Who wants to volunteer what they would say? Remember, our question is, what do you mean by that? So how do you phrase the...
Well, there are a whole bunch of things in this question.
Yeah, there's a bunch of,
Why do you believe all religions are the same? What makes you believe all religions are the same?
What makes you arrive to that conclusion?
Well, so he's claiming all the teaching of Jesus is really just love, the same as all other religions. He's challenging us, why do we think Christianity is better than other religions? And not telling other people how to live is what we should be doing. So those are again, there's three kind of underlying challenges to Christianity here. Which one do you address first?
I think I would address that the religion are not the same. It's like what make you say that all religions are the same, or where did you get the idea that no, probably not a good question.
How did you arrive to this conclusion?
That all religions are the same.
Show me where the teaching of Jesus is only about love.
Whoa, that's a loaded one. that takes about a 6-week Bible study, though.
So, Walter, that's actually, that would be a little antagonistic, because that person probably don't know. So you're going to shame him. You're going to shame him because he doesn't know what he's talking about.
Have you studied all the religions? That's all.
The thing is, this is a different environment, right? We're talking about a Bible study group. It's a newcomer.
This person is a newcomer. You don't know. You don't shame him.
Have you studied all the different religions?
As you can say, strict religiosity in Christianity. Christianity is intricately intertwined with history and Western civilization. We are living on, at least on the inside.
Well, see, if I was going to be smart aleck, I'd say, well, Christianity is not a religion. Because it's not. Christianity really isn't a religion. But that's plain semantics. I think you'd have to maybe do this in a few questions to try to lead them down the fact that, do you think every religion leads you to the same place?
Yeah.
Because I think you're in a pseudo-Christian environment. Yeah. Heaven and hell are part of the topic.
Yeah, yes.
And I think so I might try to do it in a different way. It's like, well, what do you think determines whether you go to heaven or hell?
The problem is the other religion doesn't even have heaven or hell.
That's the answer now.
But I know that. But the thing is, if we go to...
Because they're saying that everything's the same.
But it'd be very interesting to figure out what their view of heaven and hell is before you engage the next step. If they don't believe in heaven and hell, then you have to go down a different road. It's not about religion anymore. It's about not knowing the Bible. Yeah. Okay. They don't know Christianity, so you can't be defending Christianity to a pseudo-Christian that doesn't know Christianity. You need to educate them.
The first really thing that you address is how did you end up with the conclusion that all religions are the same?
There's something else in there too.
Go ahead.
I had the same question.
He doesn't like it that it tells other people how to live or believe. Mm-hmm. So he is basically challenging Jesus' instructions to be able to tell people how to live.
It's the authority of God, right?
Yes, he's challenging the authority of.
You know what, I think what I would do, this is just me, I think I would tell a story and then ask a question. Bill Wise's story about the hunting cabin. You guys ever heard this? Maybe I think I've told this story. Bill Wise tells a story. He went on a radio program and they told him he couldn't use any references to God or the Bible to defend Christianity. And one of the stories he's told, I love the story. He basically said, okay, you are offended that we think Christianity is exclusive. There's only one way, and that's through belief in Jesus. Well, let me give you the example. So say you know this rich person and they have a cabin in the remote mountains someplace, and they've invited you for a week for vacation. And they're giving you very precise instructions how to get there because it's their cabin. And you say, no, I don't need the instructions. I'll find my own way. What are the chances of you finding your way if there's no GPS, there's no maps, there's only one way, and the owner of the house probably knows the way. And so if you choose to go your own way, well, you're not going to get there. And that's the exclusiveness of Christianity is not about we're excluding people. It's just there's only one way. And everybody's welcome. Everybody's welcome on the way, but we're welcoming. But there's only one path that leads to the cabin.
It's twisted in a way, so people will think that you're being like, what do you call this?
Narrow-minded.
Discriminating, exclusive. And the thing is, I'm not discriminating because everybody's welcome.
No, and the thing of that is, okay, by telling me, you said you have to accept everything. And why don't you accept me as being inclusive? So
good.
you actually are not, you're being exclusive, you're excluding me.
Yep.
Because you don't like my belief. You only want like, oh, take everybody except yours. Because your belief is there's only one way. If you're open to everything, you'll take my way too. You got no say because you're open. So if I said there's only one way, fine, it's your way. But no, they're telling you you're wrong because you don't accept others.
Yeah, Coco did an interview. I can't remember what the Indian guy was that he did interview with, but the guy was a religious pluralist. And in the interview, it's like, I think all religions lead to heaven or nirvana or whatever he was referring to. And Coco's comeback was, okay, but again, what do you mean by that? It's like, if all religions are right, yet Christianity says that there's only one way, then they can't all be right. I mean, you can't have it both ways. You can't have religious pluralism and have religions that think they're the only way. Because the Muslims think they're the only way. The Jews think they're the only way.
Yeah, no, and the thing is, okay, Buddhism thinks the highest goal is to nirvana.
You lose yourself.
You lose yourself. You don't want anything. You detach yourself from everything. That's their heaven. That's a version of heaven. The Indians have different. You get reincarnated in you better place. Better situation the next time. And us, we go to be with God in heaven. And the Muslim has a different.
Yeah, I mean,
How can it be the same?
The problem with religious pluralism is they can't all be right.
Yeah,
because all religions think they're right.
Yeah.
Okay.
They can all be wrong, but they cannot all be right.
So I think in this format, which is a Bible study, it might be good to go that direct.
Yeah.
It's like, why do you think all religions are right? I might shift it. Why do you think they're all right? Because they all think they're right. But everybody can't be right. And I think if you brought that circle, you could show the fallacy in the concept.
It has a different outcome. It cannot be all right.
Claim that they're all the same is
But they're not all the same because they all claim exclusivity, and they can't be all exclusive. So they all fail. Okay. Number 3. All right, the Bible. The scene, you're riding the university shuttle with a friend who notices a Bible in your backpack. I've read the Bible before, he says. It's got some interesting stories, but people take it too seriously. It was only written by men, after all, and men make mistakes. You try to recall the points your pastor made a few weeks ago before your the Bible's inspiration and come up empty. So the challenge, you didn't know your friend had any exposure to the Bible until now. You're concerned about keeping the conversation productive while being sensitive to the fact that the shuttle riders are listening. What do you say in response?
Pressure.
So you again, it's a 10-second window. This is a good one.
Just because man makes mistake doesn't always make mistake and everything.
I don't think that's the first question that you have to
All
ask.
the school books studied by men while studying.
Yeah. Sunday textbook.
Every textbook is written by man.
But that's a shutdown. That's a shutdown. You shut down the conversation with that. You shut it down. There's no more conversation if you say that.
Well, I think the first thing, anytime someone comes up with the mistakes of the Bible, you have to ask them, what mistakes?
Like what?
Can you? Yeah, like which one? Well, they'll never know, and it is a little bit of a shutdown. So you got to have a follow up to that because you're going to get the sounds of silence, right? But it's the only question.
So his basis is like because he believed the books are written by men.
Written by man, and man making mistakes, so it's has full of mistakes.
That's the premise. You basically written by men, then
It's full of
we cannot
mistakes.
read the.
Yeah, it's not inspired, right?
Yeah.
No, it's not just, it's full of, it has mistakes because it's written by man, but the thing is, it's like, we study other texts that is written by man, and we don't think that's full of mistakes.
Now, how do you say that in a way that it's not a shutdown conversation?
That's the thing. But
I mean, what Walter's right is but you have to weave that question in a way that you want them to have an answer they can give you. So what question can you ask that requires them to answer? Because everything we've said basically.
It's written by man.
Which one? So then the person will say.
And they'll say, I don't have any idea.
I don't have any idea.
I've just heard. Don't you know? That's the classic one. Wasn't it? This is a.
Which one is
Yeah.
It's like I'm full of mistakes. It's like
Which one?
Which one?
You know,
the
you're the
Bible
best
scholar. You know, it's like that's not fair because I haven't found a mistake.
Why do you say the Bible is too serious?
Oh, that's interesting. I wouldn't have picked up on that.
People take it too serious.
Why do you think people take it seriously? Then they have to answer something. They have to come up with something.
you know what?
So you should take it not seriously?
That might be a really good place to back up to the beginning of that sentence.
Yeah.
It's like, it's got some interesting stories. Can you build on that to engage? So it's like what stories? Because then you can ask the follow-up question, once he gives you a story, it's like, do you think that story's true? Because if you have a true story in the Bible, now you're working your way. You better take it seriously. So that might be a place to engage more softly.
Less threatening. Yeah, less punching.
But I think that's what these scenarios are trying to teach us is try to, in your mind, be able to pick the point to engage, because our natural instinct, Walter and I are on the same page. I'm like going to hit you in the nose. It's like, of course you're wrong.
You're being irrational of your claim.
But yeah, I think the too seriously part is really good. But I think we go back to
I guess you can even start.
these interesting stories you're taking too seriously. What are the stories you liked?
Yeah.
Now you see what he thinks about the Bible.
Yeah, because it's too general. That's too vague.
Well, if you can't come up with the story, then you're going to have to backtrack, okay? Because now there is no foundation. But if he has something like Noah and the flood, or
Well, the way he's saying it, it probably has something.
Yes.
It's something like some,
But that's the positive part of his negative conversation. And maybe in this case where you have 20 students staring at you, it might be better to engage with the positive instead of the negative.
So what's his what do you call it?
He just wants you to come up with Columbo questions. He doesn't give you any answers.
All right, let's go ahead and jump to the self-assessment.
Answers.
The book might have, it has some examples. It has some examples.
Yeah, the book has
Like suggestions,
Yeah,
suggestions.
Page 23.
What's the?
20.
Don't tell me the page, because this doesn't go
The
by.
page is right there at the bottom. That page at the bottom matches.
Page 23?
Page 23. What time are we at? Oh, it's 3 o'clock already. All right, so that's no question, back one. There we go. So page 23 if you're in the book.
Oh, here's a suggestion, huh? I got some suggestion here to the 3 challenges.
Okay, let's go back to them then. Go to page
Said
19.
first challenge, the kid asked, it's not rational to believe in God, and there's no proof. And so you can ask, what do you mean by God? That is,
Well, that's an
what
interesting
kind
question.
of God do you reject? That's an interesting question.
It's actually better than our answers.
He's the pro.
He's been at it for
Yeah,
40 years.
yeah.
What kind of God do you reject? That's one of the questions. What specifically is irrational about believing in God? Since you're concerned about proof for God's existence, what kind of evidence would you find acceptable?
So we got 2 out of the 3.
Yes. What arguments for God have you considered? That's a loaded question.
Yeah, that's a little more advanced for a 15-year-old.
Yeah, 15-year-old probably can
The
answer
first 3 I
that.
think are good.
Yeah. And what did you find wrong with them?
Okay, that's still, I don't think the 15-year-old can handle that
Can handle
last
this
one.
question, so I don't.
Go to scenario 2. the
Scenario
Bible study
2,
group.
Christianity is basically the same as all other religion. And so, how much have you studied other religions to compare the details and find a common theme?
Ooh, that's a harsh.
That's a hard
That's a little harsh. That's a little harsh.
Well, if you make a big claim, that they're all the big
Yeah, that might be a that sounded a lot like a bloody nose question.
And then another question, let's see. Why would the similarities to be more important than differences? I'm curious. What do you think Jesus' attitude was on this issue?
I think what he's trying to get around is like, why do you think other religions are the same as what Jesus is teaching? Jesus taught exclusivity.
Yeah.
I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me, right?
Yep. Did he think, let me see. Did he think all religions were basically equal? Is it telling people to love one another just another example of doing what you're objecting to? Telling others how they should live and believe? That's kind of like questioning what he's
actually,
proclaiming.
that's one that I missed,
Yeah.
and we should have got that. So the claim that you shouldn't tell people how to believe, and
But
you're
you
telling
are telling
me
me
how to believe,
how to
because
believe.
as a Christian, we
How to
want to
do.
share. That's part of the core of our belief. So you by telling me I can't do what I believe is actually challenging what I believe.
Yeah.
And so
It
you
is.
don't believe that everybody should be left to what they
because
believe.
I should shut up, and you can only dictate, and I can't.
Well, and last time I checked, every religion evangelizes. There's no exception, because anytime someone shares their belief with the intent of convincing the person they're talking to that they're right, it's called evangelism.
Yeah.
Even atheists evangelize.
Yeah. So yeah, you can.
If you think you're right, you're already breaking that rule.
Yes, it's one of those kind of exposing the irrationality of their claim.
Yeah, like it's what's the name of that? Like you're proclaiming something that is what's the thing of that when we studied
With the circular logic.
yeah.
Yeah, it's the
You're telling me not to
law of non-contradiction.
Yes, law of non-contradiction. And then that's pretty much it for the second one. Challenge 3. Do you have any books in your library? Do you find any truths in those books? Also written by humans who are prone to error.
That's the student.
That's what Walter Danny says.
Oh, textbook phone of error.
It's written by humans too.
Yes. There's a lot of evolution textbooks.
Is there a reason you think the Bible is less truthful or reliable than other books you own? Do people always make mistakes in what they write? If not, then why would you dismiss the Bible simply on that basis? Do you think that if God exists, he would be able to use humans to write down exactly what he wanted?
That's a pretty strong one.
If not, why not? There's a challenge for.
I don't have a challenge for it in the study guide. What's the challenge for?
Challenge 4 is it's wrong to force your views on other people. I encountered this at work.
Mm-hmm.
You can't legislate morality. Christians involved in politics violates the separation of church and states.
Oh, I can respond to this for starters. It's like, what do laws do? He said you can't legislate morality, but all laws legislate morality. That's I mean that's you have to ask. It's like, what do laws do? What does the law do?
You're not supposed to steal. You go to jail if you steal.
That's morality, right? I mean that would be.
You kill somebody, you go to jail.
But the separation of church and state is interesting to engage with. How would you gauge that one? Because that's the one they use against us, which is totally abuse of what it meant.
What it was intended, is it?
So, I mean, first thing you can ask is like, do you understand what it says in the Constitution? Maybe that's too harsh. It's like,
That's too harsh.
what did,
I like it though.
well, because the whole thing is you need a history lesson, right?
What's it called?
Non-contradiction?
The law.
Law of non-contradiction.
No, the clause in the Constitution. The first amendment that says that.
It's the separation of but it doesn't actually say it that way. It says that well, I don't know the actual quote, but effectively it says that no religious organization should be influencing
They can impinge on the people.
impinge on the people. Basically, it means the government should never have a religion.
Yeah,
Which-
like kind of what happened in
See, unfortunately, our government is like a religion now.
That was put in there because
in
of
like Europe,
the state religion. that-
Yeah,
a state religion.
It was really against having a state religion. Of course, we have a state religion in America. It's called atheism. But
The only one they push.
yeah, I mean, you promote atheism. That means it's a state religion.
Is this term specifically religion is in the law constitution or not? The separation of power.
Let's read it. What's the?
What it says, the idea was that you couldn't have a state religion. That was the premise. Because in England, there was the Church of England, and it dictated who could.
Anybody else that's
And the reason
outside
people
that,
came to
you get-
America originally was to get away
You
from
get persecuted if you don't belong to
religious
that.
persecution.
It was religious.
Because governments aren't supposed to persecute you for your religious beliefs. That's the purpose of the First Amendment, not to remove religion from the government. Our founding fathers couldn't care less. They just didn't want want the individual people to have their religious, yeah.
What the people believe.
No, we've allowed it to be corrupted in America to what it's not.
Misinterpret, but they twist the meaning.
Yes.
First Amendment, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or of the...
That's it. Those are all other rights. So that's it. It basically says that the government's not supposed to interfere with our religious activities. It says nothing about the religion being in the government. The religion and prayer in the Bible are completely okay in government.
But
Restrict the government.
The government
Not
from,
the citizen.
not the citizen.
But
Yep.
we flipped it.
Yeah, the idea is to restrict the government from interfering in religious beliefs, not the other way around. All right, let's do the self.
Hang on, see, Coco's question is, do you vote? When you vote for someone, are you expecting your candidate to pass a law reflecting your point of view? Wouldn't that essentially be forcing your views on others? How is that different from what you're troubled about here? Is it your view that only non-religious people should be allowed to vote or participate in politics? Or did I misunderstand you?
that's a pretty powerful argument.
Yeah, where specifically in the Constitution are religious people excluded from political process because of their spiritual convictions? Don't the law force a morality of some sort? Can you give me an example of legislation that does not have a moral element underlying the law? That's what your question is. It's like the law.
Yeah, they all have moral or ethical underlining. Now, they may violate it, but that's a different conversation.
That does come up a lot, though.
But the one question he asked is a good question. It's the same one Walter asked. Effectively, it's like, what part of the Constitution says that?
Yeah.
I mean, you can say that in a non-threatening way.
Yeah.
And though they might come back with the First Amendment, it's like, can we look that up and read that together so you can show me what you mean?
Actually, you can use the example to show that's what we mean by non-separation. We have a religion, top-down control.
Yeah.
The true religion of a Christian is bottom-up. It's a different channel. So so the influence is bottom-up influence. That's not in the Constitution at all.
Nope.
Because that's to exclude the top-down.
The top-down.
Now, yep. Top down.
Yeah, because, China's an example. There's the Chinese church has to be approved or you can get into trouble, right? Yeah, that's the top-down model. And that's what the U.S. Constitution is supposed to prevent. Yet it doesn't. Okay. Self-assessment. What is the missing piece in our approach to sharing with others? We are missing the blank from the and to the.
Yeah, that makes sense.
We're missing a bridge from the content to the conversation. So what we tend to be missing is how do we move from the knowledge to the interaction, right?
I feel that first.
So
How do you go from what you know to what you can use?
So number 2, what are the 3 essential qualities of a good ambassador? We've had this even in my class, right? The first one is knowledge.
Wisdom and character.
Wisdom and character, right?
Good ambassador. Okay.
Right, so knowledge is to accurately...
You meant by the character, like if you don't know somebody, like the way they present
The way you present the information.
Okay.
You're
You're not be like obnoxious.
well, the example he used If you're a drunk, you're probably not the best ambassador for Christ.
Well, that's if the person know you.
No, I agreed. And-
If you're not drunk that particular time.
but we have as close. We have to godly character.
It's one of those. How often does it turn you off when somebody says, and they talk all the Christian talk, and then you see them as like behaving not Christian?
Well, that's a character.
That's the character.
If you know the person,
Yeah.
then if you know the person, the character here means your character, like how you act in the workplace or things like that.
It's an attractive manner of presenting your information.
You're obnoxious, that would turn off people too.
Yeah, no, it's true.
All right. What insight suggests that we change our approach to evangelism? Before there can be any harvest, there must be a season of gardening. Think. 2 points. This is a pass-fail class, so you're okay. What is the modified goal for our conversation about Christ? Instead of trying to
Win?
or close the deal, we're going to try to put a stone in someone's shoe.
I don't think you have to say that to them, though.
No, you don't say that.
You don't say that, that's your goal.
But he said when he's trying.
No, wait.
Well, he's giving a talk because he's typically taken there because of the talk of this.
If you're at a college campus, it's actually not a bad idea to start with that because it's a joke, right?
Yeah.
You need to break the ice. And it's like, oh, I'm here to annoy you, but annoy you in a good way. And that's kind of a nice breaker. Okay, so 5. What is the difference between tactics and strategy? Strategy involves the big picture, and tactics involve the details of engagement, right? All right. Finish these sentences. Tactics are not tricks, slick ruses, clever ploys. You're not trying to trick anybody. Tactics are not meant to coerce, humiliate, belittle.
I don't think people have that. If they're even up to the point that they want to share they're not into this.
Well,
they're actually more horrified to tell the other people what they believe.
Well, I'm not.
Because of the stigma of that.
I'm not that generous. We've been in circumstances, I know I have, where I'm so right, I'm ready to punish the other person.
Well, but you're talking to somebody that's not.
Well, it could be a
I'm not
pseudo-Christian.
I'm not there to win an argument with somebody. It's like you're nervous to share your thought. That's the last thing you're gonna think. Like I'm gonna put you down. It's like I'm even like, can I do this, Lord? Maybe next time.
No,
Actually, the danger when this comes in for the people that are you're close, and they're not Christian.
Well, not only that.
You have that your filter kind of comes off.
Well,
total stranger, you kind of have that filter all the time.
Well, it's a better than thou approach. The other one is.
You always have that filter generally.
No, if you don't know the person, you're not going to go for that.
A family member, when you get to the argument, it's like.
Yeah, that's true.
You get to that point.
Yeah, you blooded them.
No.
It's like not productive.
But even the stranger engagement can get to this. If you're pushed and they push back, if your instincts are to shut them down, you can use this to embarrass them.
That's true.
And that's what we don't want to do, right? So there's plenty of opportunity for us to use this improperly, which is, it's like a knife.
For surgery, to save a person, it can also be used to kill.
Next. What are good tactics meant to accomplish? Tactics are clever ways to blank. Maneuver to get a footing or appropriate advantage in a conversation. So they're a way to kind of catch your breath in the middle of a conversation. Because all of us will engage with people that are smarter than us in some topic, and you can't be all prepared. So questions give you a chance to kind of regain your balance in the conversation. Tactics are meant to exploit others' what? Well, bad thinking is his answer, right? Weaknesses is really what he means. For the purpose of guiding them to what? The truth, right? Because as Christians, we're all focused on truth. The key to the Columbo tactic is using carefully selected questions to productively guide or advance the conversation. Yeah, what you're trying to do is guide the process, right? Give some of the advantages to using the Columbo tactic. Questions are excellent conversation starters. Questions are interactive. They draw people out. Questions are non-threatening or neutral. There is no preaching involved. You're actually letting the other person talk more than you. You can make headway without actually stating your case, which is actually interesting that you don't have to actually give your position at all. No. But you can direct the conversation and let the other person make your points. In session 2, he has a couple examples that he's done where he basically asks them a question and he talks about it putting evidence on the table. And now when you get to the end of the questions, now you collect that evidence and bring it back to them with the rational, when they've made your...
evidence that they're already...
Yeah, they've made the point for you. Questions can buy you valuable time and information. Next, there's one more. Questions keep you in the driver's seat in the conversation. So the first application of Columbo is to gather information and employs some form of the question, what do you mean by that? You got it. All right, food for thought, and then we'll close things out. Sorry, we ran a little late. I don't know how long this is going to take. All right. What do you mean by that? Is the important question that forces the other person to make sense out of his own objections. For example, a common challenge to the authority of the Bible is the Bible was only written by men. Yes, the Bible was written by men, of course. We agree on that. But something else is implied by the word only. This needs to be fleshed out for clarification. And your question, is this not the challenge, the fourth challenge? Okay, we've already kind of gone through this then. The study guide's a little different than the book. So I think you need to flesh out what they mean by pushing this. All right. I think we've covered everything. Comments, questions?
They practice.
Well.
But I think you have to have the nudge. You can feel it, the nudge of the Holy Spirit.
Where I know, but you tend to like, maybe next time, Lord.
You can feel it. Actually.
Yeah,
like,
I do.
You have to share it. Like, say something about God.
Just don't resist it.
You should be
I
typically
say like, next time, Lord. I'm too scared. I know what you're talking about. I can feel it. You got to do something.
Well, because you'll get desensitized if you resist it. So it's important to allow God to guide you and listen to that urging, because he's laid the groundwork. You're just the tool in his hand, right? So.
And generally, you don't know what other interactions that person to before you got to you.
I don't know who posted a sign at our lunch break. If you have any prayer requests, contact Judy. I don't know who put that there, but I was like, okay. I have no idea. It's out there in the waiting room, in our line.
Contact you.
Yeah, with my phone number.
Hey,
No, anybody try to contact you?
No.
hey,
Nobody has taken that.
this is a
There's one girl that always asks for prayers.
this is a good segue. Why don't you close in prayer? Come on, you're the prayer lady.
Don't be saying, "Oh God, please." Talk normal.
Okay, let's go ahead and close with prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for these friends and family. Sharing better ways to engage for you. Help us to feel your urging and not resist it. We know that you'll urge us when we're meant to engage. Give us the encouragement to do what you've asked us to do and employ these amazing tactics that you've provided us with to be non-threatening and engaging and hopefully put that stone in people's shoes. I pray all this in your name, Lord Jesus. Amen. So, that's fun.
I have one point. So, I also feel if you talk to some people, which is only occasional conversation, it's likely you have to think about the goal. If the goal is to inform them or even a little bit educate them, it's maybe more offensive. But if the goal is to extraction, you extract some information, then it's different. Because you can see some answer, just shut them down. You not shut them down, just let them know, okay, your premise is wrong, so they have a stone. They shoot, they leave away. It's sometimes if the people come to your house, then a different situation. You have a 10 minutes of conversation.
No, I think you're right. I think you have to kind of have a long-term strategy if you know you're going to have multiple interactions with somebody. But I think what the question technique really gives you is you can have that leading question, and then now you can collect the information, process it, and then the next time you can start at that same place, but you start with an educated perspective. So you can ask more questions and use the questions to kind of lead the process. They may not even know where you're leading them if you do it.
You might not even know yourself.
Well, that's...
It's like depending on their answer.
You
don't know.
Well, and if they don't, then just consider it a gardening episode, right? So...
Let somebody else know.
Let some pass the baton and go. But yeah, I think not feeling the pressure to always go all the way is more likely that you're going to do the engagement. The problem is, like, a lot of us resist the engagement because I can't close the deal. I just won't bother. Somebody else will do a better job than me, and those are all not the right answers.
What's being taught in the church is like you have to close the deal. You got to ask them before they leave if they want to accept Jesus Christ as a personal Savior and Lord.
Well, they say you need to share the gospel in every conversation. I've heard this. And the thing is, I don't think that's true. I think you need to show the gospel in every conversation. That's a different statement. But that's the character, right?
That's how we were raised. If you want to share the gospel, you have to live to the point of baptism.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it's hard. It's like, it's impossible. So it's like, I'm not a preacher. How can I do that?
Yeah, no, it's...
Don't do it.
It's sad that that's what we were taught, because it stunted the life and activity of the church, because we basically, only the preacher can do that because he's the only one, right?
Work with the preachers.
Yeah, well, because we pay them, they're employees. We've outsourced the job.
Anyways.
We paid you for that. Go do it.
They're the expert.
Yeah.
But that answers a huge question for me, because my problem with sharing is always, where do I start? It's like there's so much.
There's so much to share. Yeah, there's so much to share.
Because you don't know where they are. So this
Yeah, so
where they're at. Figure out where they're at. Question, gather.
well, the thing is, you're not even trying to figure out where to start. You're just asking questions, and the starting point will show up, right? So,
Where do you start? Yeah.
no, I appreciate this approach. And like I said, I've watched these videos a whole bunch of times, and
Well, hopefully by the end of
maybe I'll get better. Oh no, no. I think this is a lifetime exercise, but it's useful technique, right?
No, Grandma, I gotta go. It's okay.
Well, thanks everybody.